Hey, welcome everyone to another episode of Beyond the Case, which is a podcast for global leaders from the Harvard Business School's OPM community, where they come and talk about real life decisions, failures, mental models, and the principles that have helped them build huge companies and get to the OPM program. My guest today is Somdutta Singh. She is another fellow OPM participant. Somdutta, how are you?
Doing very well, Sovin. Thank you so much for having us on your amazing podcast. I love the name Beyond the Case.
Absolutely. Thank you for making yourself available. I want to start off just by requesting if you could introduce yourself, your company as well. You could go far back as, early years, what your family environment was like in terms of approach towards business, and then, how you got the inspiration to either start a company or inherit one.
Absolutely. So, hello, everyone. I'm OPM 6364 and grateful to Shohin to have us on this show today. So, I come from a family of doctors and scholars and researchers. Born in Calcutta, my parents are both surgeons. My mom's a cardiothoracic surgeon, neonatal cardiothoracic surgeon. My dad's a neurosurgeon. So you can pretty much understand that when you come from a pedigree of doctors, you are destined to be a doctor pretty much across the world. I think that's pretty much how you take your lineage forward. But here I was, reading about the stories of accomplished entrepreneurs, and especially inspired by Dr. Amar Bose, who was my idol since I was a kid, because the Bengali family, the community that I come from, being an entrepreneur is not a way of life. You usually to become a doctor, if not anything else, a lawyer. If you do anything else, then you're looked down upon. And I come from the Singh family, which is the Roy Chaudhary Singh family, all scholars, very erudite people. One of my granddads also has a Nobel laureate, and I'm not getting into the more nitty gritties of it. So the pressure was always that you're going to follow that family route. But in Bengal, a lot of people don't know, is one of the richest and the strongest business community. That's where the Tatas, the Birlas all come from. Is a very strong Marwari and a Gujarati fraternity who drive business. And that always enticed me that how's that they do business? What is that excites them to do business? And the story goes like this. I would go with my dad to Calcutta Club, which is the British club, meant for all members, either you're a bureaucrat or a doctor or a business person. And I remember we had a very humble ambassador showing, for those who don't know, it's like a version of a Beetle, but the Indian version of a Beetle that was founded by Hindustan Motors. And I would see all of my dad's friends come in really fancy Mercedes and Beamers and BMWs and so on and so forth. And they would always talk about foreign holidays. And I would ask my dad, how do they have the time and the money for this, right? Because you don't take me anywhere except for Indian holidays. How are they going for these foreign holidays? And dad would laughingly say that, there's a reason we take the Hippocratic oath, because we're like gods. We have to save lives and we don't get paid much to do that. But business can be high risk and high reward. And that stayed with me. High risk, high reward. But the reward sounded more enticing because it seemed like that if you can take that high risk and if you can bet on something and work hard towards it, the rewards can be multifold. And that was I think I was 8 or 9 years old, but that was my first seed, Shohin, to kind of get to something that was not typically medicine. And my parents were very busy. Sometimes mom would not come back home for 2-3 days at a shot because she's a surgeon, right? She's saving kids' lives because she's a neonatal cardiothoracic surgeon. So all that kind of made me feel that the freedom that you had being an entrepreneur and a business person was way more enticing than taking medicine. That was as a kid. But then fast forward when I went to study in US and I finally got a chance to meet my idol, Dr. Amar Bose. One of the things I learned from him is that, entrepreneurship comes from a place of deep awareness of not just the risk you're taking, awareness that a lot of dedication and discipline is required and a lot of reflection is required to get to where you want to. And the reflection means that every entrepreneur hires people who are better than them, because it's not the vision alone that matters. It is the execution that sees the light of the day. So having said that, from what I was as a 9-year-old, what I was at a 16 years old, and what I am today in my late 30s is a completely different journey, right? But what stayed with me was freedom, the reward, and the sense of reflection and discipline. I think those are some things which are so, so deeply innate to an entrepreneur. Started my journey at 16. I used to sell chocolates from my dormitory to my college. That's how my hustle started, to finding my first company when I was 21, selling it at 23. It was an ad tech company, starting my family office at 24, starting investing in startups, going back into entrepreneurship in my late 20, 28, 29 again, building another company, exiting that. And now my third venture, Assiduus, which today is a multi-billion dollar organization. If you talk about the valuation, we're over $1 billion in revenue. We have built what today is the third largest in e-commerce distribution and supply chain. We're a middleware company. So today, Sohin, when you go and buy Red Bull or Unilever products online, the entire backend is managed by Assiduus. So like that, we have Dabur, Himalaya, and many, many large FMCG brands in 20 plus countries. We do that. But, I'm still that 16-year-old, that excitement, that discipline I had then, which I was learning. I think I still have that, is why, despite having built and sold companies, despite the hustle, the sleepless nights, the painful juncture of being a woman entrepreneur, because there's just 2% of us, so it's not easy. But I still thrive on that principle and discipline I learned from Dr. Amar Bose. That curiosity, that discipline, that dedication is what keeps me going.
You spoke about reflection as one of the points, in
Yeah.
entrepreneurship. Could you emphasize on why reflection is key to being an entrepreneur? And you're on your third journey now, so I think no one better than you to speak about, of course, not just the tribulations, but also the trials that an entrepreneur goes through. And how does reflection play a role in that?
You know, Sohin, one of the things that we often forget, that entrepreneurship is not just about the tag or the valuation or that company or that business, because a lot of it sometimes is just facade, right? Why I say reflection is, there's something that I've learned growing up from my guru Swami Vivekananda, right? Means I come from Bengal. A lot of people would know that he was then the most spiritual icon, even in the West, even in Chicago, US, UK, and so on and so forth. One of the things that he talks about in Karma Yoga, which is, the yoga of reflection and work, is detachment. And why I talked about reflection is that one of the biggest challenges I think entrepreneurs face is that we get too attached to what we're building because we care about the outcome so much, right? So that even when there's a small trial and tribulation, we take it too personally. If you ask me, was I like this in my 16? No, I took it personally too. When I made my first batch of chocolates that didn't do well, you won't believe, I was so disappointed. I was learning from another fellow dorm mate of mine, and I took it to the college and somebody put it in the mouth and spit it out and said, so bitter. And I felt very bad because I tried, I was like, how could they not see my effort? But why should I want them to see my effort? That's how the world is. Sometimes critics do not know the value of everything, but they're important too, because those are what makes you reflect. Now, what was my reflection as a 16? Should I give up just because somebody spat it out, or should I keep trying? It wasn't easy. I went back, made a second batch, third batch. It was the fourth batch where I actually got the chocolates right. But it's still the same. When I started building Assiduus, a lot of people asked me, you made your money, you've had two successful exits, why are you doing it? The truth is, those were not just success that happened overnight. I battled depression in the process, because when I built my first company and I started, going out and pitching it, I got rejected a million times. And sometimes the rejection was because I'm a woman founder. They asked me, who's your co-founder, right? And it felt like you needed a co-founder to succeed. So at the end of the day, the point of reflection is very simple. Am I too attached to what I'm building? Am I too attached to people's opinion? Am I too attached to rejections? Or I should focus on what is important. Why am I doing this? There's a reason I wanted to be an entrepreneur, right? I wanted that freedom. I wanted to travel the world. And if I look back on all of that, I've been able to do everything. And today, if you talk about what is success, if people determine it by money, then, I've made a lot of money. But if you ask me what is success, it is to me a constant curiosity and learning. I'm only 30% there. I have 70% long to go. And that is my reflection. My reflection is not about how much money I have in the bank. My reflection is about, is my learnings enough? Have I learned enough to be on your podcast today when I'm sharing my journey? I'm still just learning. I'm still that curious kid who's trying to figure out how can I make the next batch right? And that's what is happening with Assiduus. When I started building this company, I didn't expect it to become this big. It has. And you know why I went to OPM to study? Because I started questioning myself, whether I'm good enough to be the CEO of this company. Should I hire a different CEO? Should I get a different team? Because 0 to 1 and 1 to 10 are very different journeys. That's what is reflection. But then I figured, no, it's me who needs to unlearn. I need to go back and meet people who have done this over and over again. And like you and I were chatting, what inspired you to start this podcast is because the journeys of the others was what really, really enticed you. And you felt, wow, these are stories that needs to be told. That's your reflection is why we are on this podcast. And that's my reflection that keeps me going as an entrepreneur.
Very well said. Thank you for also cleaning up my response because I went rambling about why I started the podcast and you summarized it so well. You also mentioned, you battled depression, and I'm not sure how comfortable you are talking about that
Absolutely comfortable. I've
without
talked
getting
about
into
it.
details and giving anything confidential away. How important is it for entrepreneurs, and I'm only focusing on the entrepreneurial subset right now, to recognize emotions that they're going through, trying to address them head on, and also speak out about it? Could you talk about your journey there, please?
This is a great platform to talk about it. And I've never shied away talking about depression, including TED Talks that I've talked, where I've actually gone on stage in front of hundreds of people and talked about it. In today's day and time, it's even more important because I'm a millennial. I don't know about your age, but I'm a millennial. And for me, what I have realized is that time we didn't have access to as much content and information we have today. And a lot of it is pseudo, right? What you see online, you start basing your fundamentals and your benchmarks based on what you see online. The truth is, you don't even know half of that reality. When and why I talk about depression so openly is because a lot of us are silently battling it, right? There is still stigma around talking about it because you're scared to be judged. If you get a cold and cough and you pop a pill, nobody asks a question. You get a headache, you go see a doctor, you get an MRI, all that is good. But sometimes the pain stems from deeper concerns. The pain stems for unresolved questions and trauma that you've never dealt with. And as human beings, what's wrong in talking about depression openly? Because it's got nothing to do with a stigma. It is a mental fatigue. It's real. It happens. Some of us can deal with it in ways that are different than others, and some of us need medication to get over it. Today, if you talk about the standards you and I see all the time, the amount of pressure, the amount of stigma that is around it, right? When I realized I have depression, it was when I was building my second company, and I reached a scale, and I was in this condition where I'm like super tired. I would wake up every day working 16 hours a day. The company was doing phenomenally well in terms of numbers, and that's why I say numbers are not benchmark of success. But I had a team that was not where the culture was not scaling, and that was killing me because I was like, am I going somewhere wrong? And then I was dealing with a personal relationship that wasn't doing well as well. Like, I was in a relationship with someone that wasn't doing well either. And I would always get kind of questions saying that, oh, you're too involved in work, why you don't have time for the relationship. And here I was at work where my team was not scaling with the growth of the company. But guess what? The bank had the numbers in the bank was fantastic. The profits were fantastic. So that was not the reason why I was going through it. I was questioning and doubting myself because my personal and work life balance was absolutely not there, right? Little did I know, there's actually no concept of balance when it comes to work and personal life, especially when you're an entrepreneur. There is nothing. So I was battling a preconceived notion that led me to not sleeping at night, not eating well. I lost a lot of weight to a point. I was in New York then, to a point where I actually went and met a friend and I said, I don't think I can do it anymore. And then she said, no, you can. You just need to heal, right? You're hurting and you need to talk to someone who's going to give you unbiased opinion. And I went and I saw a psychiatrist and I sat down. All I did was cry. And that's what reminded me, and I was sharing this with you when we were having this conversation before we went live. It reminded me of Swami Vivekananda again, because when he went to Kanyakumari, he had reached his rock bottom. He didn't know what to do. He was like, I'm going around India spreading this concepts of philosophy, and he was way ahead of his time, and nobody was reciprocating to him the way he would have anticipated. And he was depressed. He swam the Arabian Sea in the middle of a rainy night without even knowing whether he's going to survive it. But he did. That's where he got his enlightenment. And me being in depression was my moment of enlightenment, Shohin. I realized, one, I don't have to be good at everything. We grow up in an environment where we are told that we have to excel in everything. I was trying to find that balance. You know, the answer was what? I was chasing an illusion. There was no need for balance. I stopped loving myself. I was chasing validation. From whom? My biggest validation is me. Look at how far I've come. I stopped appreciating that, and I'd set these goals for myself in my personal relationship, in my work, that were unrealistic. And those conversations opened my mind. And you know what it did to me? It not only, again, reflection, not only made me reflect, it made me appreciate myself, which I hadn't done in a very long time. I was chasing, chasing, and my depression actually made me a seeker. Today, I don't chase. I don't chase validation. I don't chase reciprocation. I keep doing what I love doing. And I don't care about the outcome. So what? Even if I fail. So at Assiduus, when I was doing my Series A, I got about almost 27 investors who said no. Not only did I successfully raise money, I raised money from very good investors who were super supportive, and just concluded another Series B. And guess what? Today I get to choose who I want on my cap table. And that's freedom. Most of us, because we chase validation, don't have the freedom, and we end up being very, very sad, and we don't address that sadness. And it kind of reflects on our family, our personal life, our friends. Why? So that's what it did to me. And why I talk about it openly is because we all need help. And there is no harm in asking for help, whether it's medical help, whether it's help from our friends, our family, our mentors, our guides. I think we don't ask help enough because we're so worried about validation and what somebody else will conceive of us. We forget to be us. And I learned to find myself again in the process.
Thank you very much for being so vulnerable and opening up about that. I appreciate that. I'm sure the listeners do as well. Is this journey what pushed you towards spirituality, or was that something you were raised into?
You know, that's a beautiful question you ask. I was raised by my grandparents because mom and dad were always very busy with their practice. I was raised into a very spiritual household. My granddad was a very erudite man. He taught me Sanskrit. He would read the Vedas to me. I speak the language. I speak Sanskrit fluently. Indeed, I do a lot of recitals on Veda and all for the younger generation because there's so much to learn. But when I was in US, I kind of lost touch on it with it completely, and then I figured in that process of depression that I actually had let go of two very important part of my life, which made me who I am. One is music, because I'm trained in classical. I used to do music regularly, and I'm back onto it. Recently had a performance in Carnegie Hall. I do a lot of music. And then the other was my spiritual side, which is what made me the person I am today. And I had lost touch with it. So I started doing chanting again. I started actually teaching Vedas to young kids, Vedic mathematics to young kids, and I found myself in the journey. And today, spirituality to me is a way of life. You know, it is my journey of evolving into a person that is a seeker, and I've become more aware of that as I've evolved, in my journey of spirituality. So while I was raised into it, I lost touch with it. And now I'm back into it, and it has changed my life significantly, significantly, because of something to look forward to, which is not necessarily transactional, which is evolutionary in nature. And that's my music and my spirituality.
You spoke about reflection as an entrepreneur. You very graciously shared your journey and your battle with depression, which I feel most, if not all, entrepreneurs or human beings go through at some point in their life, whether they may recognize it or not, whether they may speak about it or not. And then you spoke about the spiritual side that you've always had, and then you were able to reconnect with it. Going through this journey while also having two successful exits, how do you think has this journey transformed your relationship with your ambition?
Mhm.
And what kind of changes have you seen in the product of your work
Mhm.
having gone through this level of maturity?
Again, the very, very important two things you talk about. One is when you say successful exit, I would just like to define that it is not the financial success. I think for me, the reason it was a successful exit, well, of course, we made money in the process and all that, is because I knew when to let go. Especially in the second venture, I thought I'm going to become the next Unilever because I owned these 8 brands that I built from scratch. I was doing phenomenally well. Then I realized I don't need to. I need to know when to let go. So that was my success definition, that I learned how to let go. That process helped me with Assiduus. Today, hiring people who are better than me, knowing where my limitations are, how I need to upskill myself. I'm constantly learning. That's the reason I went back to study in OPM, because I learned so much from my peers and my professors. And that has helped me to today take it to a scale where, if you ask me, Shohin, we are at a pre-IPO stage where we have got IPO offers to go IPO in the next 2 years. We've had like a, NASDAQ pre-IPO session and all of that stuff, but I'm not attached to it. If tomorrow there's a successful acquisition that happens, I'm absolutely okay with seeing what's best for the company and for the team. The other thing that has changed as an entrepreneur is, before I defined success, as a woman entrepreneur, exited a successful company and made money. Today, my definition of success is, did I create a few more millionaires in my team who in future can lead a self-sustainable life? And did I inspire people to be entrepreneur? That's my measure of success. I'm not attached to the outcome of what happens just with Assiduus. I'm looking at an outcome that, how can I impact few other lives? How did I empower my team? How did I help them get to the next stage? So I think that's been a big evolutionary journey for me. The other thing which we don't talk about enough is that, while we do all of this, Sohin, we should not compromise on our personal life. I am very happily married to an amazing man. My husband, Magnus, has been a big part of my evolution. This maturity that you're talking about, 6 years back, and the Shoma I am today, I give a lot of credit to my husband. Because, he's Scandinavian, he's from Denmark, a very different, empowered community. He sees things very differently. And he made me see a lot of things I never saw in myself. He wakes up every day, and it has not changed in 6 years. And he reminds me, you see the star? You're so awesome. And the word awesome has Shom in it. And it has become a thing in our life where he says the word awesome has Shom in it, right? It made me, on a hard day also, when I have a hard day, very, very often, like when I'm like, oh my God, I can't do it anymore, I'm like, the word awesome has Shom in it. And that makes me smile. So sometimes the people we choose in our life play a significant role in our evolution and journey. And even that is okay if you make a few mistakes along the way, because I've done it too. But once you get your life partner with whom you can evolve, I think that is the most important part of life, Sohan. Whether it's your friends who you surround yourself with, whether it's the fraternity that you surround yourself with, whether it's the personal life that who you have in your personal life. I think one thing we take for granted is that without that circle, this framework of work and entrepreneurship and business means nothing. Because if you don't have people to share it with, if you don't have people to evolve with, and if you don't have people to love and share good moments, even if you're single, if you don't have a good community of friends and people that you have a good time with, there's a problem. The other thing is, having hobbies and having other passions are very, very important for you to be good at your business. Whether it's sports, whether it is, you write, whether it is, you do music, whether it is any form of art. It's so important to have those hobbies because they keep you real. Like I said, right? Getting back to music helped me with my business, because it's my sanity. I've learned how to play tennis with my husband. Me and my husband play chess together. We have other things we do beyond just work, which makes the work more exciting. Why I'm sharing this is, it doesn't happen overnight, but it is those reflections where you don't stop prioritizing to live because you have to, do something else bigger than, because that is the larger definition of life. No, Sohin, when you and I are interacting, I would remember you by how you treated me, how I treated you, and how we influenced each other in many other ways and not just business, right? So that's why the podcast that you're doing and why I jumped onto doing it with you is because you're trying to create impact. It's not your business. You found something interesting and you're taking it to the next level to share these journeys. That is your passion. And that is what keeps you going. And that will add value to your business because you have something else to look forward to. So that's my summary. I know I gave a longish answer, but I just wanted to share things that is just beyond work. Because if I didn't have a good personal life, I wouldn't have evolved the way I have.
I'm going to switch now from the spiritual side to your leadership journey, right? What are some non-negotiables that you think you have as a leader?
The first and the most important thing is clarity to me, which even means that you don't know something and you own it and you say it, right? There's this book I'm sure you've read by Ben Horowitz, Hard Things About Hard Things. I love that book, right? There's a reason I like that book because sometimes it is acceptance of those hard things is what takes us forward. So that clarity is very important, right? Knowing what not to do, having that clarity of thought is very, very important. The other thing that is non negotiable for me is passion, the balance of passion and prudence. Now, it can be not a 50-50 balance, it can be a 60-40 or a 70-30. But I wouldn't hire someone who's super passionate but not prudent. Or I not hire someone who's super prudent and not passionate, because that means they're very tactical and they'll never be strategic, right? So that is something that is non negotiable for me. The other thing that is non negotiable for me is kindness. Sohin, I don't care how smart you are. If you're not a good person and if you don't treat people well, you have no place in my life. Because I never treat someone the way I don't want to be treated. Because I want to be remembered as a good human being. Nobody cares how much money you have when you go away, but people will never forget how you treated them. I hire people based on those qualities. And we have this test called the tree test. You can Google it. It's very prominent test. So we whenever we hire people, we make them draw a tree and we see how they draw the tree, right? The roots, the leaves, whether there's a bird sitting there, whether there's a human being sitting below. Talks a lot about someone's personality. So for me, these things are very, very non-negotiable. But if you ask me, I can not teach someone how to be kind. I cannot teach someone how to be passionate and prudent at the same time. And I cannot teach people how to basically have clarity. These things can't be taught. Rest everything else can be taught. So these are some non-negotiables for me.
Could you talk about a moment where you might have had to make some tough decisions as a leader or a CEO? How do you approach your decision making mindset at that point? What kind of mindset do you get into to take such tough decisions?
The toughest decision that any CEO has to take, I think there are only two parts to it. One is with the team and one is with your customers and your consumers, right? We are a B2B2C company. So I'll talk about the team because that is the toughest thing that you have to do. Sometimes scaling culture becomes the biggest challenge for the growth of a company. And which means that the people who worked for you when you were 0 to 1 may not be the same people that work for you when you're 1 to 10 and 10 to 100. And they're very difficult. So if somebody is not scaling with the culture, with the growth of the company, you need to sever those ties. And the hardest conversation to have is when somebody's been with you for a very long time and you have to let them go because it's that relationship has reached its expiry date. My dad would always say this, that when he would see a medicine, he said, everything in life comes with an expiry date, just like this medicine. Expiry either happens while you're still alive or expiry happens after you die. But it happens. It will happen. That expiration, to communicate that expiration, if you're very close to someone, is so hard. And I'm very emotional as a person, right? My EQ is very high as my IQ. But so when you sit across the table and you say, you know what, we're going to still be friends, but not here anymore outside of work. Sometimes people take it very nicely and sometimes people are like, are you kidding me? Like, how is it even possible? So that moment, how you deal with that is very, very important because there is not just about letting someone go or moving on. It is about what they did for you and they were a part of your journey and how do you ensure they continue to be a part of your life irrespective of the journey. So at Assiduus, we have something called as an Assiduus alumni network. So we don't really ever, ever, ever sever a tie. We just evolve. And there are people who've gone out and come back again. And then there are people who've gone out and still are friends. So we're like, you know what? We've created this culture where we say they get rewarded every time they give us a referral. They get rewarded whenever they're referring another individual to the company or a client to the company. We have our annual meet. So there are things we've done for them to know that it doesn't end here. It continues, right? So that's why we call it an alumni network, that no matter whether we say you graduate out of Assiduus. Once you graduated, then you move on to a next venture in life and you can come back again. Like you are come back to study in your school again. So that's okay. Or You go out and you can refer somebody to the company, or you bring in a client and you get rewarded for it. We keep that culture. So that's the hardest thing I've ever had to do, right? And letting go of a client who's not adding value anymore, that's still okay. But letting go of someone who's built something with you and communicating that to them is the hardest thing.
What's one uncomfortable truth about women in leadership that you believe is not talked about enough?
Women do not support women enough is the biggest truth. Whatever we may say, see, I'm not an advocate of the word feminism or empowerment because, we come from a culture where if you see our Vedas, Rig Veda has a stotram that says, Strihi Brahma Bahuvit, which means, woman, you're the ultimate source of enlightenment, right? So you don't have to enlighten the creator, right? That's why we have two X chromosomes. Problem is, we are not as community centric as men are. And there's something to learn from that, right? We get too personal sometimes without seeing the larger impact of it. And there's no community centricity as much. If you see a woman in leadership, sometimes it's a very hard truth. They'll not be really lifting another woman. There's no harm in that, right? It means that insecurity is still there. Now, if you ask me why, is it a bad thing? No, it's years and years of, subversion. It's years and years of trauma, and it takes time to heal from that. So I'll give you an example. When I got married to Magnus, I saw Scandinavia, right? The culture is very empowered. There's too much of security. They all uplift each other. It's a very different culture. And I learned a lot. It's not there in India. But that's it. I don't think it's a bad thing. I think it's an opportunity for me and my friends and others who are in the community, and we're trying to do that, to change that. But it is a hard truth. It is a very hard truth. Also, most of us get rejected multiple times. And I say this with utmost humility. Being a woman founder is crazy hard. Very hard, especially if you're solo. And most of us don't want to take the risk is because we don't get supported enough. That's also why my family office today, we are LPs in a lot of funds where I make it a mandate that one GP has to be the woman. Or I invest in businesses now where I at least look for one founder to be a woman. Like, we're making small baby steps to support and show that, hey, you know what? We can uplift each other in the community. But that is the truth. You cannot say and sit on the other side and talk about empowerment and, oh, no, we do this, which is not there. It's a rarity. Something we all have to work towards. Have we developed since the last 7-8 years? Yes, we have, significantly. Do we still have miles to go? Yes, we do. But is this a problem? Yes, it is.
You've already given me insights or given us insights into why you went to OPM. I believe you mentioned it's because you wanted to know if you're a good leader or if you could be a better leader. Could you also share some of the takeaways you had from OPM that have still stayed with you?
Percent that one should never stop learning and one should never stop unlearning. Sometimes the baggage of our past often is the only deterrent to our future. That's my biggest learning in OPM. We all assume things from far. Oh my God, how glorified is their life? When I met some 5-generation, 6-generation family businesses, I found that their life is harder than mine. I actually don't have a benchmark to live up to. I'm my benchmark. But here they are. They have a legacy that they have to live up to. They have predecessors who are accomplished. They have, they're much to do than I have. So sometimes it breaks those perceptions. So unlearning is very important. And the other thing is, listening is very important. When you've had your first unit, and I finished 2 and we're graduating in March. One of the things is sometimes an innate ability to listen during the sessions about others' journeys and opinions and what they have to share can be a significant driver to your learning. So a lot happens, when your professors are teaching, and the interactions that your fellow classmates have, their opinions, where is it coming from? Where is it stemming? I think those are very, very important things. So it's not just hearing, it's listening. I think that's what I have learned in OPM. And the reason I keep going back is the final thing, which is my biggest takeaway, is the community, right? And trust me, I have a lot of friends beyond my cohort, a lot of seniors, a lot of juniors, and it feels like I'm back in college because it's a fantastic network. And if you can leverage this network to learn and grow from, nothing like it. So I think that's been my 2 units takeaway from OPM.
Wonderful. A book that you'd like to talk about that might have influenced the way you think?
Actually, a couple of them, along my journey, I think there are different books that have played significant role. The first book that my dad gave me, and a lot of people don't know, is Many Lives, Many Masters by Brian E. Weiss. Right? He gave me the book for a reason because he was a non-believer. He never believed in past life. He never believed in that souls are reborn. One interaction with a patient completely changed his perspective in life. He was a Freudian student. He believed in the Freudian school of thought. But that book is not just about past life and rebirth. That book is about faith and conviction. Sometimes experiences change that. And if we are open to experiences, I think life can present some beautiful opportunities to you. I think that played a role. And I've read that book 3-4 times. As I've grown up, that book has spoken to me very differently at different stages when I've read it. The other book that I love is Atomic Habits.
Mhm.
Again, I've read it twice, once in my late 20s, once again now. It's not about the incidents in life. It's about the discipline to deal with it. Hey, that's beautiful, the way he articulates it. Sometimes you're at the pinnacle of what you believe is success, then you drop head down. How you rise from there as a phoenix is what is your legacy. So that's why I think whether it's your podcast or whether sharing this journey is that it's okay to hit rock bottom, but it's a discipline to rise from there is what remains as your legacy. And then recently, Ben Horowitz, Hard Things About Hard Things. I've read 0 to 1. I've read, so many other books. I'm an avid reader, but books that I reread again is one I told you, Atomic Habits is one of them. Definitely another book that I have read a zillion times is Bhagavad Gita. If you know how to speak Sanskrit, or even if you don't, if you speak the English version, I think that speaks to you. The conversation between Krishna and Arjuna, it's not about just the relativity. It's not about just a war. It's not about what people tell you, so deeply philosophical. It's life. You make decisions. Sometimes it may look anti against everyone. If it's the best thing for you, just do it. And that's what Gita is about. Again, Gita's all about reflection. You read Bhagavad Gita at different parts of your life, it speaks to you differently. Because sometimes we shy away from making the hard decisions because we feel somebody else will get upset. Oh my God, validation. Oh my God, who's going to think? Who cares? People will come and go. Are you happy? Is this the right thing for you? Just do it. So, and then of course, I repeat Swami Vivekananda again and again because the millions of his books, I've read every single one of them. My house is a mini library. Swamiji is to me a way of life. Swamiji to me is not just a philosopher, not a guru, but it's like he lives in this era with me, because even in 1873, 74, the things that he's written are relevant to you and me. Like, one of his things about take a risk in life. If you win, you lead, but if you fail, you'll guide. How powerful is that, right? It's the hardcore element of entrepreneurship. Then he talks about all power is within you. You can do anything and everything. Today, everybody talks about manifestation. That man talked about it like a century back, right? He said, you believe, do it. It'll happen. Just have faith in it. All this. And he talked about women. He talked about women and said, just educate a woman and then leave her be. She'll find her destiny. Simple things like this. So again, to me, he's a way of life. I carry his book like with me pretty much like every day. When sometimes I'm sitting in the car, I just go through it and I'm like, wow, this speaks to me. So yeah, means I think each book had a role to play in my journey of life, but some of them I've read many times again, and that's what I'm sharing with you.
Thank you very much. One last question is, what advice would you give a younger version of yourself if you could speak to her today?
The only thing I will tell her is stop being a chaser. You're not defined by anybody else's perception of you. You're defined by your own. And spend more time loving yourself. That's it.
I think there's been so many positive takeaways from this for anyone who's listening and trying to learn. So I appreciate everything you've shared. And yeah, thank you again for making yourself available.
No, thank you. And thank you for adjusting your time. I know it's very late where you are, but Sohin, I'm so glad you're doing this podcast and I wish you the very, very best.
Thank you.